So we are going to be looking at some really not great images, but they're necessary for us to understand racism of the age. That the as we created the new citizen, we've identified what the perfect citizen looked like. In doing so, we are going to create what they don't look like. This image here to the right was an acceptable piece of education, science, of social Darwinism, or maybe even into the eugenics. You see the high culture of the Greek. But again, I'll let your eyes peruse this, but you see the racist nature. And this was acceptable truth in the 1890s into the 1920s. We have talked about enlightenment and the biological racism. We went back to Buffon. We talked about how he identified the concept of the climate, the idea that their people are degenerative, and then that emerged into biological racism, which again, completely based on lies, more about assumptions. With the second industrial revolution and the victory of industrialism, it appeared that Europe were superior. And again, at the time, economically, technologically, yes, there was a sense of superiority. There's idea, though, that it was race-based is crazy because they were perceiving progress as linear, always going, because that's the positivism of the age. But in the side, remember, as one of my professors back in the 80s said, in the Dark Ages, when the Europeans were just one step out of the cave, there were phenomenal civilizations in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Wonderful pieces of culture, scientific knowledge, tons of things happening, and things occurred for those civilizations to come to an end. Likewise, our civilization will eventually come to an end, but that was not. They had an existentialist view of the here and now. The success of the European nation state, especially out of Germany, the idea that social Darwinism is, of course, correct. 19th century anthropologists began with an assumption of European or white supremacy. No matter what country you're in, the United States would be more white supremacy. In Europe, it'd be European supremacy. In England, it's called Anglo-Saxonism. In Germany, it's called Aryanism. They have their own flavors of their superiority, bless their hearts. But again, they're based on this assumption, not scientific truth. Now, we've already discussed Herbert Spencer, but we're going to look here now from a racist lens. What we see, he applied Darwin's natural selection to societies. He argued that the superior societies would rise and that the superior societies are compelled to dominate weaker societies. Really important that you understand this compulsion, because if you are a superior society and you let the weak within you, you'll become weak. You'll degenerate yourself. This is an American cartoon, political cartoon image here. It is drenched with racism. It's the idea about school beginning. We see people of color. We see white people there. I'll let you peruse that. But again, Uncle Sam represents American supremacy, manifest destiny, the God-given role. And now we are to educate even those degenerate that don't want to be educated. Very important view there. And this becomes the foundation of the 19th century racism. That's going to lead us right to the Holocaust in the 20th century. Here we see Count Arthur de Gobineau. This is the first time I've come across him, so I had to do a little bit of research about him. The next guy is the one I know more about. But he published a book in 1854, which really is the beginnings of this positivism of this age of progress. And his first thing he wanted to do, coming out of the revolutions of 1848, he sought to justify the rule of his aristocracy over the commoners. So he wanted to talk about these human races, the idea that why the aristocracy. So originally it appears that he was not even looking through a racial lens, but a supremacy lens. And that's when in his quote unquote research, he understood now that actually people are based on their skin color. And they're going to classify humanity by skin color. He identified the white race, the yellow race, the red race, and the black race. And typically in that order, he would argue that they were supremacy-wise. But as we look at that, And he utilized this system to prove that European white supremacy. So the inequality of human races, if you really kind of wanted to, if you, let's say your senior year, you want to do a research project on really the foundations of 20th century racism, this might be a book that you might want to peruse to kind of see that primary evidence of what was going on. But now we're going to go to the end of the century and Houston Stewart Chamberlain. This is not a biography I read, but I really wish I need to find it. Because looking at this, my thought is it's critical. Hopefully it's critical. But he identifies it as the evangelist of race, Houston Stewart Chamberlain. Houston Stewart Chamberlain, he was a dude that really gave birth, really defined what Aryanism was. His book, his monumental book, is The Foundations of the 19th Century. He is, again, looking at the here and now, ignoring the realities of history. In The Foundation of the 19th Century, he argued that Aryans, a group of the Aryans, were the founders of European supremacy, European culture, European civilization, ignoring the reality of the Greeks and Romans, but it's about the Germans. Why did he say that? Well, he was a British citizen who became an expatriate once Benjamin Disraeli became prime minister. It appears that he believed that England was degenerated because it let one of those people become prime minister. So he fled to what he considered the greatest country in the world. He believed Germany represented the purest European society, as Jews were still marginalized in many ways, socially wise, maybe not politically. And he argued that they had the purest Aryan group. This is the concept of Aryanism. He's building on this idea of Volk. Volk is the romantic German thought that if you unite all of the German-speaking people, the people would transform the world. And this is, again, you begin to say, hey, is this based on, is this where Hitler got his ideas? Of course, exactly. But he was identifying that the Aryan race became the ideology of progress. This is some really stuff that I get frustrated with, because even in today's world, in our classes, in our regular world history 1 class, we still teach the Aryan invasions of India. That idea developed during this time period, the idea that European Aryans, at a time of chaos in Europe, a tribe of them went down and bestowed culture in India. Of course, all the Indian historians rejected because white people did not give them culture. But that is all based on this assumption of white supremacy, white culture, whiteness, Aryanism. Really important. As we see that, we see how Spencer goes to Gobineau, goes to Chamberlain, and by the time we're in the 20th century, we have this element of racism. So as we kind of conclude on social Darwinism, racism, and mass politics, we're going to see this idea. Politicians really embrace social Darwinism. They're really going to preach the idea that we're great because we're Aryan or we're English. We're better than everyone else. Vote for me, and I'll ensure our rightful leadership. In the United States, this is where we start seeing Jim Crow. 1890s is the age in which the nadir starts, that I've talked about earlier with you in the Black History Month, the idea of this terrible time in which Reconstruction is destroyed and we have ultimate segregation based on race. A rigid racial hierarchy throughout the world formed to really justify imperialism. We'll see this specifically at the end of the year with South Africa, but we're just seeing this idea in which there are civilized people and then there's subhumans, and we're going to have a ranking of them. And it was seen as truth. Movies like Birth of a Nation became the iconography for white supremacy. Even President Woodrow Wilson, who gave an initial showing of Birth of a Nation in the White House, he proclaimed this book was an excellent example of white humanity and the civilizing power of the white people. If you haven't heard about the Birth of a Nation, I do encourage you to check it out. Even just read the Wikipedia page on it. It is radically racist movie that became considered one of the greatest movies ever. So check that out. And that's where we're going to pause right here. We've ended the idea, quick run through on racism.